My wife thought I'd never discover her late-night meetings, but one call proved everything. And the moment I heard that voice on the other end of the line, something inside me, something that had been quietly cracking for months, finally broke clean in two, though if you looked at us from the outside just a year before all this, you would have seen what people like to call the perfect couple. My name is Daniel Harris. I'm 43 years old, a project manager for a construction firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. The kind of guy who wears steel-toe boots more often than dress shoes, and who comes home smelling faintly of sawdust and coffee, not cologne and fancy hotel soap. My wife Melissa is 38, a marketing director for a tech company uptown, smart, polished, always put together in those sharp blazers and heels that seem to click confidence into the floor with every step. We've been married for 14 years, had a good-sized three-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, a silver SUV in the driveway, a golden retriever named Max who believed every human existed solely to scratch his ears, and a life that from the outside looked stable, maybe even enviable. People at church used to call us solid, the couple who had made it through the rough early years and settled into something steady, predictable, safe. I liked that word, safe. I thought it meant trust, loyalty, shared routines like Friday pizza nights and Sunday morning pancakes. I didn't realize until much later that Melissa had started hearing safe is boring, that somewhere along the way my dependability had stopped being a comfort and started feeling like a cage to her. It started small, the kind of shift you don't notice when you're busy paying bills and calculating deadlines. Melissa's job had always been demanding, but about a year ago she started talking about the new campaign, about launches and strategy decks and late-night video calls with clients on the West Coast. "It's just the new project, Dan," she said one evening as she shrugged into a blazer at 8 p.m., perfume cloud drifting past me as I sat on the couch with my laptop open doing my own end-of-day reports. "We've got a big push this quarter. I'll be back before midnight. Don't wait up if you're tired." She kissed my cheek lightly like a habit, not a choice, and grabbed her keys. It wasn't the first time she'd worked late, but something about the way she avoided my eyes when she said it tugged at the edges of my attention. Still, I nodded, told her to drive safe, and watched her leave, telling myself this was what ambitious careers look like now. Long hours, late meetings, constant availability. I finished my reports, took Max out for a walk, and went to bed around 11:30, the side of the mattress next to me cold and undisturbed when I woke up at 6. Her car was in the driveway by then, and I found her asleep on the couch, makeup smudged, laptop open on the coffee table with a half-finished presentation glowing faintly on the screen. "Rough night?" I asked gently, setting a mug of coffee on the table. She blinked awake, smiled tiredly, and launched into a story about a stubborn client, a last-minute pivot, the joys and pains of marketing. I listened, believed her because that's what I did. I trusted my wife. The late nights multiplied slowly like drops filling a bucket. First once a week, then twice, then suddenly it felt like every Tuesday and Thursday she was on with the West Coast or out with the team after a big pitch. She started dressing differently too. Less of the casual work sweaters and more of the fitted dresses, higher heels, lipstick a shade darker and more noticeable. "You look nice," I said once as she adjusted an earring in the hallway mirror. She paused, looked at me in the reflection with a flicker of something I couldn't place, then smiled. "Thank you, Dan. It's just the job, you know how it is. Clients expect a certain image." I didn't know how image worked on construction sites, hard hat, safety vest, clipboard. I didn't know how image worked in her world of rooftop bars and tech conferences. Still, I nodded, told her she looked amazing, and went back to checking my emails about delayed shipments. The first real red flag came on a Sunday afternoon when I was folding laundry in the bedroom and her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Melissa was in the shower, steam curling out under the bathroom door. Normally, I didn't touch her phone. We'd always had an unspoken rule about boundaries. But the buzz didn't stop, it kept buzzing in a pattern that felt urgent. I glanced at the screen, intending only to see if it was her mother or something work-related that I could shout about through the door. A name flashed there that I didn't recognize, Evan Client. I almost put the phone back down, but another message preview popped up under the name, just enough text to hook into my gut. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you." I froze, fingers still curled around a half-folded t-shirt. My first instinct was denial. There must be an explanation. Maybe it was some stupid inside joke from a coworker. Maybe I'd misread. Maybe my eyes were tired. I set the phone down slowly, carefully, as if it might explode, and stood there listening to the shower water pounding against the tiles. I could have picked it up again, could have opened the thread, scrolled up, dug into the truth right then, but I didn't. Instead, I finished folding the laundry with robotic precision, pulse thudding in my ears, and when Melissa stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, singing softly to herself, I smiled stiffly and handed her a neatly folded pile of clothes as if the ground hadn't just tilted beneath my feet. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to her breathing even out, my mind replaying that message over and over. Last night was incredible. Maybe it meant the campaign, I argued with myself, some creative presentation that had gone well. People in marketing used exaggeration all the time. But the second sentence killed that justification every time. "I can't stop thinking about you." That wasn't campaign language. That was intimacy. That was longing. That was something that didn't belong in my wife's phone under any professional label. The next day at work, I found myself checking the clock more than blueprints, glancing at my phone every time it buzzed, half expecting some follow-up disaster to land in my lap. Nothing came, no confession, no explanation, just a text from Melissa around 3 p.m. Running late tonight, big debrief after the launch, don't wait up. Love you. I stared at those two words, love you, and wondered for the first time what they meant coming from her now. Habit, guilt, truth. That evening, instead of going straight home after my shift, I parked my truck in a lot near her office building uptown, grabbed a coffee from a corner shop, and waited. The building lobby was all glass and polished metal, the kind of place that made my work boots feel too loud when I walked through it. I didn't go inside, I just watched from across the street, leaning against my truck, pretending to scroll my phone. At 7:15, I saw her emerge with a group of people, laughing, her hand brushing the arm of a tall man in a dark coat. I couldn't make out his face clearly from that distance, but he was close to her, too close for someone labeled client. They walked down the street together, the rest of the group gradually peeling off until it was just the two of them standing under a street lamp, their heads tilted toward each other in that intimate bubble people form when the rest of the world disappears. Then he reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and I saw her smile in a way that used to be reserved for me. Something sharp lodged in my chest. I didn't confront them. I didn't go charging across the street to make a scene. That's not who I am. I watched, memorized the angle of his shoulders, the way she leaned in, the path they took when they finally moved away together, heading toward one of the nearby side streets lined with restaurants and boutique hotels. Then I got back into my truck, hands shaking only slightly, and drove home in silence, Max's excited bark greeting me like a punch as I walked through the door. That night, when Melissa came home smelling faintly of wine and expensive cologne that wasn't mine, I pretended to be half asleep on the couch. She kissed my forehead lightly and whispered, "You're the best, Dan. Thank you for understanding." Understanding what exactly, I wondered as I lay there. That you were having late-night meetings with a man whose message still haunted my memory. The more I observed, the more the pattern came into focus. Wednesdays and Fridays now joined the roster of client obligations, and every time she came back, her excuses became smoother, more rehearsed. "Evan's pushing us hard on this campaign," she said once, tossing her bag onto the chair. "He's demanding, but it'll be worth it if we land this account. I might have to fly out with him next month, just a quick overnight to meet the rest of his team." My throat tightened. "Do you have to be the one who goes?" I asked casually. "Can't someone else from your team handle it?" She shrugged. "I'm the director, Dan, that's how it works. Besides, it's just business, just a client, just late nights that left her coming home with someone else's cologne clinging to her scarf." I knew I couldn't keep pretending. But I also knew that if I confronted her empty-handed, she'd have explanations, half-truths, ways to turn my suspicions into my own insecurities. I needed something undeniable, something that wouldn't let her wriggle out from under the reality she'd created. That's when I decided to stop playing the trusting, naive husband and start quietly gathering my own facts. I didn't know yet how far it would go, or how that one call would finally strip away the last of my doubts, but I knew this: my wife thought I'd never discover her late-night meetings. She was wrong, very wrong, and I was done pretending not to see it. I didn't sleep much after that night outside Melissa's office building, lying in our bed beside her while she breathed softly, my mind replaying the silhouette of her leaning in toward that man under the street lamp, the way she smiled in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months, maybe years, and something inside me began rearranging itself, shifting from the dull ache of suspicion to the sharp focus of certainty, though I kept my expression steady at breakfast the next morning, pouring her coffee like always. Listening to her talk about a long night of revisions, while the scent of that unfamiliar cologne still lingered faintly on her scarf draped over the kitchen chair, and even though every instinct screamed to confront her, demand answers, force the truth into the light, I swallowed it all down and instead told her she looked tired, maybe she should take a day off this week, to which she only laughed lightly and brushed my suggestion away with a simple, "You know I can't do that right now, Dan." Before grabbing her keys and hurrying out the door, leaving me in the quiet kitchen with Max staring up at me like he could sense the turbulence building in the house. That day at work, I tried to focus on blueprints and budgets, but the numbers blurred until my coworker Leland tapped my shoulder and asked if I was feeling okay. "You look like you're thinking about something far away," he said, and I forced a smile, telling him I was just tired, though he didn't look fully convinced. Leland was one of those guys who could sniff out tension from across a job site, the kind of friend who'd helped me move twice and brought me homemade chili when my mother died. I considered telling him everything right then, unloading the weight in my chest, but something held me back, maybe pride, maybe shame, maybe the stubborn hope that I was somehow misreading all this. But hope isn't evidence, and evidence was exactly what I needed. That night after Melissa said she had another late meeting and slipped out the door wearing a fitted navy dress that I'd never seen before, a dress she claimed she found on sale last month, I decided it was time to stop being the man who waited at home and start being the man who sought answers. I grabbed my jacket, pocketed my phone, and drove toward uptown without telling anyone. But instead of staking out her building again, something nudged me in a different direction. A memory flashed. 3 months ago, Melissa mentioned a new assistant named Claire who joined her team, a young woman who seemed friendly and talkative the one time I briefly met her at a company barbecue. And I remembered how, when Melissa introduced me at that event, Claire looked at me with a strange flicker of pity I didn't understand at the time. Now it returned with meaning. I found her name on LinkedIn, found her company email, and crafted a message pretending I needed clarification on a project Melissa had vaguely referenced at home. Within 10 minutes, Claire replied, "Sorry, Daniel, I think you may want to speak with Melissa directly. I'm not involved in her late-night client meetings with Evan." The name hit like a hammer, Evan, the same name that had appeared on her phone, the same man I'd seen under the street lamp. I stared at the email for a long moment before typing a follow-up that was much more direct. Claire, can I ask you something privately? It won't leave this conversation. She didn't reply immediately, and for several minutes I thought I'd crossed a boundary she'd never respond to, but then my phone buzzed with a message that wasn't from email, but from an unknown number. This is Claire, what's going on? I hesitated, then typed. Is Melissa having an affair with Evan? There was a long silence. Max, lying at my feet, whined as if sensing my dread. Then another buzz. Daniel, I can't say much, but you need to know something. She's not at a meeting right now. She's at the Bellcrest Hotel, room 915. My grip tightened on the phone. I'd passed the Bellcrest dozens of times. It was one of those upscale boutique hotels with rooftop lounges and rooms that cost more per night than my monthly truck payment. Why are you telling me this? I typed. Because you don't deserve what's happening, Claire replied. And because she told people you'd never find out. I'm sorry. The message punched the air from my lungs. Melissa had told people I'd never find out, almost bragged about it. That wasn't guilt. That wasn't hesitation. That was arrogance. Still, even with all the pieces fitting together, I forced myself to breathe, to think logically, because sometimes emotions fill in gaps with assumptions, and assumptions can wreck lives. I needed certainty. Evidence, truth I could stand on without wavering. I drove to the Bellcrest Hotel, each red light feeling like a personal insult, each passing car a reminder that the world kept moving while mine was unraveling. When I pulled into the parking garage, my hands were surprisingly steady, steadier than they had a right to be. I wasn't here to confront anyone violently or storm into a room like some unhinged caricature. I was here to observe, confirm, understand. The lobby smelled like eucalyptus and citrus, a contrast to the grit of my work boots echoing across the marble floor as I approached the elevator, nodding politely at the receptionist who didn't give me a second glance. Floor 9, room 915. I walked down the carpeted hallway with its soft golden lights and abstract paintings, stopping a few feet from her door. My heart thudded, but my mind sharpened, calculating. I didn't knock. I didn't want a scene. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder, and waited. Within less than a minute, I heard it muffled voices through the door, Melissa's voice, low, warm, laughing, and then a man's voice answering, Evan. I didn't need graphic details. I didn't need to shove the door open. The tone alone told me everything: intimacy, comfort, familiarity. I stepped back slowly, almost peacefully, and walked toward the elevator, pressing the button with a strange calm settling over me. But here's where the twist came, the part even I didn't expect. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I answered quietly. Hello, a woman's voice responded, soft but taut with emotion. Is this Daniel Harris? Yes, I said cautiously. There was a brief pause. My name is Emily, she said. I'm Evan's wife. And in that moment, everything shifted, not just because Evan was married, a fact that added a whole new layer to Melissa's betrayal, but because the woman on the phone sounded like someone who had been carrying a burden similar to mine. I think, Emily continued, voice trembling slightly, it's time you and I talk. I don't think either of us knows the full story yet. The elevator doors slid shut around me as the weight of her words settled like another blow. I had come here searching for truth, and now unexpectedly the other betrayed spouse had stepped out of the shadows. And she wasn't just calling to confirm the affair, she was calling because there was more, something bigger, something I wasn't prepared for. And that was the moment I realized Melissa's betrayal wasn't simple, it wasn't just emotional, it wasn't just physical. There was another twist coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. When the elevator doors slid shut, sealing me inside that quiet metallic box, I pressed the phone harder against my ear, trying to steady my breathing as the woman on the line, Emily, Evan's wife, exhaled shakily like she'd practiced this call a dozen times before actually making it. And for a moment neither of us spoke, suspended in the strange, painful awareness that the people we trusted most had been building an entire secret world behind our backs. A world we had both just walked into at the same time from different directions. But it was Emily who finally broke the silence, her voice trembling but resolute as she said, Daniel, I promise you I'm not calling to make this harder for you. I'm calling because you deserve to know everything, and because I don't think you realize what you've stepped into. Her words tightened something in my chest, not in a way that made me panic, but in a way that sharpened my instincts, because the tone she used wasn't just the tone of a betrayed spouse. It was the tone of a woman who'd been carrying a secret, and the moment she recognized I was in the same sinking boat as her, she wasn't willing to stay silent anymore. So I took a breath, leaned back against the elevator wall, and said quietly, tell me what you mean. Emily inhaled deeply before speaking again, and I could hear city noise behind her, the whoosh of a passing car, a horn honking somewhere far away, as if she were standing on a sidewalk working up the courage to spill something that had been locked inside her for months. Evan told you he was divorced, didn't he? She asked, and my pulse jumped because it hadn't occurred to me that Melissa might believe something that wasn't even true. I hadn't heard Evan say it, hadn't heard him say anything except muffled laughter through a hotel door, but I realized instantly that this was exactly the kind of lie someone like him might tell. I don't know what he told her, I answered truthfully. I don't know what he's being to her, I just know what I saw and heard. Emily let out a bitter laugh, one that cracked at the edges, the sound of someone who'd been lied to so thoroughly that her disbelief had dried into something brittle. He tells everyone he's divorced, she said. Women he meets at work events, women he meets on flights, women he meets on those damn rooftop lounges he likes so much, but he's not divorced, he's married to me, and he's been doing this for years. I felt my jaw tight. Years. My elevator reached the ground floor with a soft chime, but I didn't get off yet. I stepped aside and let the doors close again, needing more privacy, more silence than the lobby could give me. Emily, I said slowly, carefully, have you talked to Melissa before? Do you know if she's the only one? Another cracked laugh. Melissa isn't the only one. She isn't even the most recent one, but she is different. The elevator hummed softly as it took me back up toward the rooftop bar level, giving me the illusion of floating upward through layers of truth I hadn't prepared to hear. Different how? I asked. Emily hesitated. Because she wasn't just sleeping with him, she said. He's been using her, manipulating her. Daniel, I found emails, dozens not between them, between him and his partners. The word partners made something cold slide down my spine. Partners in what? She inhaled sharply. His business, his side business. Evan isn't just a client, not really. This whole campaign your wife thinks she's working on, it's not a campaign. They're using her company's resources without the company knowing to push their own product lines, illegal ones. The floor beneath me felt like it shifted and I braced my free hand against the railing. Illegal, my wife, I struggled to fit the pieces together. Are you telling me Melissa is involved in something criminal? Not knowingly, Emily said quickly, and I felt a flicker of relief before she continued. But Evan has been feeding her altered files, getting her to upload materials she thinks are marketing test runs, except they're not. They're pre-launch materials for a brand he and his partners have been planning to sell under the table to bypass FDA approvals. Supplements, unregulated formulas, shady investors. My mind reeled. Melissa, despite everything else, wasn't stupid. She was sharp, diligent, detail-oriented. How could she not see something was wrong? How deep was she in? And then another terrifying thought hit me. If Evan used her credentials, her corporate access, then she could be legally responsible for something she didn't even understand. Emily, I said, swallowing hard, why are you telling me all this? She exhaled, shaky. Because I tried to warn her. Reached out once, a fake email, anonymous, but she ignored it, and now you've been dragged into this, even without knowing. My grip tightened on my phone. Dragged in how? Emily's answer came out small, almost apologetic. Evan knows who you are. That stopped everything. What? He saw you last week, she continued quietly. Melissa didn't notice, but he did. He told me you were sniffing around outside their office, and Daniel, she paused, voice trembling. He told his partners there was a risk now. A chill ripped through me. A risk. A risk that you might figure out the operation, she said. A risk that Melissa might panic and confess if she thought the affair was exposed. A risk that someone might trace the files back to her account. My pulse hammered so loudly I could hear it echoing in my ears. Not only had Melissa betrayed me emotionally, she'd unknowingly dragged herself, her job, and now me into something dangerous. Emily, I said slowly, what exactly are they planning? It was the moment her voice cracked completely. They are planning to disappear after the new year, she whispered. Close everything, dump responsibility on Melissa, let her take the fall for the uploads. The elevator dinged again. I didn't move, couldn't move, because suddenly everything made an awful kind of sense. Melissa's late nights, her frantic behavior, her exhaustion, the secrecy, the distance. She wasn't just having an affair, she was being groomed, manipulated, used. Why tell me now? I asked softly, because last night, Emily whispered, I found something. Found what? There was a long pause, like she was gathering the courage to say it. An email draft Evan never finished, she said. It was addressed to your wife, and it said he was leaving her on January 3rd, leaving the country and never coming back. My stomach dropped. January 3rd, barely weeks away. He's going to vanish, Emily whispered, and he's going to let Melissa be the scapegoat. I closed my eyes, grounding myself against the elevator wall. Betrayal hurts, but this wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was danger, legal danger, financial danger, personal danger. Emily, I said firmly, pushing down the rising panic, we need to meet, we need to figure out what to do. I agree, she said. I'm not far, can you meet in 20 minutes? I stepped out of the elevator at last, the hotel lobby glowing warmly around me like a cruel reminder of how ordinary everything looked on the surface. Yes, I said, tell me where. And as she gave me the address, one thing became absolutely clear. Discovering the affair was only the beginning. The real truth, the dangerous truth, had just started. The cafe Emily chose was a small, tucked-away place on the edge of Uptown. The kind of quiet spot where people met for breakups, whispered deals, or confessions they didn't want the world to hear. And when I walked inside, scanning the booths until I saw a woman with sandy blonde hair twisted into a loose bun and eyes rimmed with the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks, I knew instantly it was her, Evan's wife, and the moment our eyes met we shared that strange, silent recognition only people carrying the same emotional wound can share. So I approached her table slowly, sat opposite her, and for a few seconds we didn't speak, we just looked at each other, both trying to understand how our lives had spun into the same intersection of betrayal and danger. Thank you for coming, she said finally, voice soft but strained, fingers wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. I wasn't sure you'd believe me. I shook my head. After what I saw tonight, I'm ready to believe anything. She gave a sad, understanding half-smile and reached into her purse, pulling out a thick envelope, sliding it across the table toward me. These, she whispered, are copies of everything I found, emails, receipts, photos, messages, financial transfers, not all about the affair, mostly about the business. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the envelope. Emily, I just need to know one thing first. How long has Evan been doing this? She looked away, eyes unfocusing for a moment as if she were staring at memories she didn't want to revisit. 3 years, she murmured. 3 years of selling products illegally, using women at marketing firms to push materials and forge corporate approvals, then disappearing from their lives before his tracks caught up with him. Melissa isn't the first, she's the fourth. The fourth. Not only had Melissa been deceived emotionally, she wasn't even special to him. He had a pattern, one that involved using smart, career-driven women to cover his tracks. My stomach tightened as I opened the envelope, pulling out pages of emails showing Evan sending Melissa files labeled Q4 preliminary, client assets, ad testing batch, but the actual attachments, according to the side annotations Emily had added, were promotional drafts for unapproved supplements tied to dangerous investors. Did Melissa know? I asked. Did she understand what she was uploading? Emily shook her head firmly, almost protectively. No, Evan is careful. He always frames things as client prototypes. He knows how to charm people into ignoring small inconsistencies, and Melissa, she looks like the kind of woman who trusts her work. She wouldn't think to question it. I nodded slowly, absorbing each word like it carried weight I wasn't emotionally ready to lift yet. He's leaving on January 3rd, I said. You're sure? She nodded. 100% flight booked. Fake name, one-way ticket. And Melissa? I asked quietly. Emily exhaled shakily. She'd wake up on January 4th to discover she'd been locked out of her company systems and served with legal notices. Investigators would trace everything back to her corporate login. Evan knows how to disappear, she doesn't. I leaned back, heart pounding, trying to steady my breathing, because even though Melissa had betrayed me, even though she'd lied to my face and given a stranger the kind of affection she'd withheld from me, she didn't deserve to have her life destroyed by someone else's criminal scheme. Betrayal is one kind of pain. Watching someone get ruined for a crime they didn't knowingly commit was another entirely. Daniel, Emily said softly, leaning forward, Evan isn't just reckless, he's dangerous. Not in a violent way, in the way con artists are dangerous. He's charming enough to win people, smart enough to fool them, selfish enough to leave disaster behind. Once he runs, he won't look back, not for you, not for me, not for her. I closed the envelope and set it on the table. We have to tell Melissa. Emily inhaled sharply. I agree, but she won't believe me. She'll think I'm jealous or exaggerating. She'll believe me, I said quietly, surprised by the calm certainty in my own voice. She may not want to, she may hate it, but she'll believe me. Emily watched me for a long moment, reading something in my expression. You still care about her, she said softly, even after everything. I didn't answer right away because the truth was complicated. I care about who she used to be, I finally replied. I care about not watching someone I once loved get destroyed because she trusted the wrong person. Emily nodded, then cleared her throat. There's something else you should know. Something that might help her believe you. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and slid it across the table. This is a copy of a transaction Evan made last week, $12,000. He told me it was for consulting. But the memo line says MH. Does that mean anything to you? MH Melissa Harris, my wife. He paid her. For what? For silence, for loyalty, for keeping her hooked. Or my stomach churned for something she didn't understand at all. I didn't want to think the worst, Emily added quickly. I don't think she knowingly took money for anything shady. He probably framed it as reimbursement for campaign expenses. He manipulated her. I closed my eyes for a moment, grounding myself. When did you find out all this? I asked. 2 weeks ago, she whispered. I've been debating calling you ever since. I didn't want to blow up your life unless I was absolutely sure, but after seeing that flight confirmation. I can't stay silent anymore, I nodded slowly. So what now? Emily exhaled. Now we protect them, even if they don't deserve our loyalty. The them was Melissa in my case, and in hers, maybe herself, maybe both. It was strange, two strangers meeting because of betrayal, deciding to shield the very people who hurt them. But that's the thing about pain, it doesn't always turn you cruel. Sometimes it turns you into someone who refuses to let more wrong happen, even when the wrong happened to you first. We made a plan, a simple but necessary one. Step 1, I would talk to Melissa calmly, privately, no accusations, no shouting, just truth. Step 2, Emily would email proof to Melissa's corporate compliance department anonymously after Melissa had time to see it from me first. Step 3, if Melissa refused to believe us, we'd go to her company ourselves. Not to ruin her, but to keep her from being ruined by Evan instead. It wasn't revenge, it was prevention. As we stood outside the cafe afterward, cold winds sweeping between buildings, Emily hugged herself, shivering. Be careful, she said. Evan can be unpredictable when cornered. I'm not planning on cornering him, I said. I'm planning on ending this. She nodded, then added quietly, he'll sense something is wrong when Melissa pulls away. Be ready. I drove home with the envelope beside me on the passenger seat, my headlights slicing through the dark as my mind rehearsed the conversation I had to have, a conversation that would rip open every lie she'd told me, every secret she thought she'd buried. When I pulled into the driveway, Melissa's car was already there. She was home early. I sat in the truck for a full minute, breathing slowly, gathering the courage to walk inside and unravel the truth to a woman who'd betrayed me but didn't deserve the ruin coming for her. Max barked when I opened the door and Melissa appeared in the hallway, still in her dress, mascara slightly smudged. Dan, she said, surprised, you're home early. My fingers tightened around the envelope. We need to talk, I said quietly. Her eyes flickered, fear, guilt, confusion all at once. About what? She whispered, about Evan, I said, and her face drained of color. When I said Evan's name, Melissa's entire body seemed to flinch, like I just snapped on a light in a room she'd hoped would stay dark forever, and she tried to play it off at first, brushing a hand over her hair, forcing a little laugh that didn't reach her eyes as she said, He's just a client, Dan. Why are you saying his name like that? But I'd spent years reading micro-expressions on job sites, picking up the subtle signs when something was about to collapse. And I could see it now, her shoulders a little too stiff, her gaze a little too focused on my face, the way her fingers twisted together like she was looking for a story she hadn't rehearsed. So instead of answering right away, I held up the envelope Emily had given me and said quietly, "Sit down." Because this wasn't a conversation we were going to have standing in the hallway like it was about groceries or schedules. And after a beat of hesitation, she followed me into the living room, perching on the edge of the couch while I took the armchair opposite her, creating a space between us that felt wider than the room itself. "What is that?" she asked, eyes locked on the envelope like it might bite her. "Proof," I said, "proof that I'm not crazy, proof that you're not just having late-night meetings. Proof that Evan isn't who you think he is and that you're in a lot more danger than you realize." Color drained from her face, but she still tried to hold her ground. "Danger, Dan, this is ridiculous. You're overreacting. I've been working hard for our future and you're—" "I was at the Bellcrest tonight," I cut in, my voice calm but firmer now. "Outside room 915. She froze, and in that instant of silence, I knew she understood exactly what that meant. Her mouth opened, closed, and tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. "Dan, I can explain," she whispered, and for a moment I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd that line sounded after everything I'd seen. "No," I said gently, "you can't, not the way you think, but you can listen." I opened the envelope and spread some of the printed emails and transaction records on the coffee table between us, documents that suddenly turned our living room into something that felt like a small courtroom. "His wife called me," I said. "Her name is Emily. She's been watching him do this for years. You're not the first woman he's done this to, Melissa. You're just the latest one he's using." Melissa's eyes flashed with something like anger now, anger at me, at Evan, at herself, I couldn't tell. "His wife," she repeated, voice cracking. "He's divorced, he told me. He tells everyone that," I said quietly. "He's still married, has been the whole time, and that's only the beginning." I slid the emails toward her, showing the chains where he'd labeled files as client assets while the attachments were marked in Emily's notes as unapproved supplement ads. "You thought you were working on a campaign," I continued. "But he's been using your access to move illegal product promotion through your company's systems. He's planning to disappear on January 3rd. One-way flight, fake name. After that, everything traces back to your login, your approvals, your uploads." Melissa scanned the pages, hands shaking so badly I could see the paper tremble. At first she shook her head, muttering, "No, no, he would, this has to be some mix-up." But as she read further, saw dates matching her late nights, file names she recognized, her denial began to crumble. "He said these were prototypes," she whispered. "Testing creative directions before the client decided. He said I was the only one he trusted at the company, that I was special." The word hung in the air like a bitter joke. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my tone even. "You were special," I said. "Special enough to exploit, special enough to risk everything on, special enough to betray your husband for, but not special enough to tell the truth. He's done this before, Melissa." Emily showed me everything. "When the heat gets close, he disappears and leaves the woman holding the bag." Melissa's tears spilled over now, streaking her makeup, and she pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. "Oh my God," she choked. "Dan, what have I done?" It would have been easy in that moment to unload everything, to throw every hurtful word in her face, to weaponize my pain, to seek revenge. But standing there, watching my wife finally grasp the scope of the mess she'd walked into, I realized something. I didn't need revenge. The truth was already doing more than I ever could. What I had was a choice between letting her be destroyed by her own blindness or helping her stand up and face what she'd allowed into her life. "You've betrayed me," I said quietly, because that still needed to be spoken. "You've lied to my face for months. You've turned our marriage into the backdrop for someone else's story. That's real, Melissa, and I'm not pretending it is. But you've also been targeted by a man who's very good at using people. And whether our marriage survives this or not, I'm not going to sit back and watch him ruin you completely." She looked up, eyes wide and red. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "I mean," I said, "we're going to your company tomorrow. You're going to tell them everything before he runs, before he has the chance to twist this any further. And they're going to see the difference between a manipulated employee and a criminal partner, but you're going to tell them yourself. No more lies, no more secrets." Fear flickered across her face. "They'll fire me," she whispered. "They might," I agreed. "They might suspend you, investigate you, watch you very closely, but that's better than being their prime suspect after he vanishes, better than being handcuffed because you stayed quiet." She stared at the papers again, then nodded slowly, a kind of grim acceptance settling over her features. "Okay," she said, voice barely audible. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll tell them everything." We barely slept that night, each lost in our own thoughts on opposite sides of the bed that had once felt like a shared refuge and now felt like a narrow bridge between two islands drifting apart. In the morning, I drove her uptown, the envelope in her bag, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. She glanced at me as we neared her building. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "After everything," I thought about it for a moment, then answered honestly. "'Cause at some point you were my best friend," I said. "Because I made vows that meant something to me even if they stopped meaning something to you. And because I'm not going to let a man like Evan decide the legacy of my life or yours. I want the truth to decide that." In the end, the confrontation at her office wasn't dramatic in a movie way, no shouting in front of the whole company, no thrown drinks or public scenes, but it was profound in a quiet, heavy way that changes the shape of people's lives. Her HR director and a compliance officer sat across from us in a glass-walled conference room as Melissa slid the documents across the table, voice shaky but clear as she explained how Evan had approached her, how he'd framed the files when she'd uploaded them, and how she'd ignored small doubts because the attention felt good, because she wanted to believe she was as irreplaceable as he said. I watched them read the evidence, watched their expressions harden when they saw the flight booking Emily had provided, the memo lines on transfers, the pattern of deception. They asked questions, lots of them. Some of them cut Melissa deeply. But she answered all of them. She didn't deflect. She didn't blame me or Emily or even fully blame Evan. She finally took responsibility for the choices that were hers and pointed directly at the ones that weren't. By the time we left, they'd thanked her for coming forward before more damage was done, for trusting them with the truth, even as they informed her she'd be placed on administrative leave during the investigation. She didn't argue, didn't plead, just nodded, eyes glossy but steady. That afternoon, everything began to unravel for Evan. The company's internal security team accessed his communications and account activities, and within 48 hours his consultant badge was revoked, his ID card flagged, his email access cut off. When he tried to come into the building 2 days later, security was waiting. Word spread quietly, then less quietly. Lawsuits began under sealed filings. The truth had a way of spreading, even when people tried to contain it. As for Emily, she finally filed for a real divorce, documents with actual legal weight, not just the fantasy story Evan had been telling other women. The last I heard through a brief text she sent me, he was under federal investigation and his January 3rd flight had been canceled not by him but by reality catching up. As for Melissa and me, that was more complicated. We didn't have a neat fairy tale ending. There were too many shattered pieces for that. We went to counseling, at first because she wanted to rebuild us and I wanted to understand whether there was anything left to rebuild. Over weeks, then months, we talked in painful detail about what had gone wrong long before Evan appeared. About her hunger to feel admired, my blindness to the ways I'd fallen into autopilot, the distance that had grown between us like a hairline crack widening over time. She apologized more than once, not just for the affair, but for the contempt she'd let creep into her voice when she talked about my job, my routines, the boring safety I'd worked so hard to provide. I listened. I acknowledged the places I'd failed too, the ways I'd stopped asking how she really was under all that busyness. In the end, we made a decision that surprised even us. We separated, but we did it without screaming, without scorched earth, without trying to destroy each other's futures. Melissa found a job at a smaller agency after her leave ended, one that knew about the investigation and hired her anyway because she'd come clean early. I moved into a smaller place closer to my sights, a modest townhouse where Max claimed the couch as his throne. We signed the papers quietly one gray afternoon, two people who had once loved each other deeply and now chose, for both their sakes, not to pretend they were the same people anymore. You might think that would feel like failure, but standing outside the courthouse afterward, breathing in cold air, I realized something. It felt honest, clean, like a wound that had finally been washed and bandaged instead of hidden. Emily and I stayed in touch occasionally, not romantically, just as two people who'd walked through the same fire and made it out different on the other side. She'd text updates about the case, about how she was taking night classes now, starting over in her own way. I'd send pictures of Max doing something ridiculous because life needed a little absurdity to balance out all the heavy. As for me, I rebuilt slowly. I started going to the gym again, took a woodworking class on weekends, spent more time with my brother's kids, letting them drag me into their noisy, messy world. There were nights I still lay awake, replaying everything, wondering if I'd missed a chance to forgive more or forgive sooner. But then I'd remember standing in that conference room or holding those emails in my hands or hearing Emily's voice on the phone that first night, and I'd know I'd made the choices I could live with, choices grounded in truth, not revenge. In the end, one call had proved everything, not just my wife's betrayal, but the difference between the life I thought I had and the one I really wanted. I hadn't chosen the betrayal or the danger or the heartbreak, but I did choose what came after. And that made all the difference. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.